My Lords, may I start by thanking the Noble Lord, the Minister, for arranging a briefing with his officials this morning, which I found very helpful. May I also say this is one of those, I hope, very rare occasions where I find myself more in sympathy with the proposal from the Noble Lord, the Minister, than I do with the speech from the Noble Baroness, Lady Randerson, who seemed determined to reopen all sorts of arguments about Brexit and who did what when. This is, in my view, a sensible and necessary disentangling of our laws from the pernicious effect of EU legislation, so that we stand on our own feet with our own laws, making international agreements such as the Interbus Agreement and adhering to and adopting in this case its protocol relating to these coach services, which the Minister has spelt out in considerable detail, and I thought, if I may say so, for a complex subject with great clarity. The impact assessment of this statutory instrument says that it has no impact, and that is the reason for not having any consultation. And I rather welcome that. We should have more laws that have no impact. Most of the laws that set out to have an impact seem only to have perverse impacts and not achieve what they're intended to achieve at all. This one is here deliberately intended to have no practical impact, with one exception which I'm going to return to, of course, to have no practical impact because it seeks to maintain the existing situation but translate it into domestic law, which, as I say, is not only desirable but also necessary, because the provisions under the TCA, of the TCA under which it operates, will effectively expire at the end of March next year, as the EU and as the other parties join the other foreign parties join the Interbus Agreement. So, on the whole, we welcome this instrument and are happy to support it. On the question of cabotage, it is, of course, possible, as the Noble Baroness Lady Randerson says, that there is some diminution of amenity to British travellers as a result of that. It is possible, and the Minister has been asked the question, and I certainly don't know the answer to it, but he may. It is possible that there are certain services that currently operate that, let us say, start in Paris and go to Edinburgh, which stop along the route and collect passengers and drop them off. That may be the case. And, of course, those services will no longer be able to operate in that fashion, picking up and dropping passengers along the route, as I understand it, once these provisions come into effect, which I think in practice is next March. No, the 1st of April next year. And as I say, that could constitute a diminution in services. But it's interesting, though, that the Noble Baroness focuses on that, because, of course, the counterpart of that is that British coach operators will not have those cabotage rights in the European Union. And I would have thought and hoped that the Liberal Democrats would be more interested in promoting the interests of British coach operators travelling abroad than in protecting the business model of foreign coach operators operating in the UK. But it appears not to be the case. Her focus is on the latter. She didn't mention the others at all. As a result of that, sorry, I didn't realise he was going to know. The other point I wanted to mention and ask about related to enforcement. The DVSA is charged with enforcing the provisions of this statutory instrument in operation. And the Noble Lord, the Minister, was good enough to give some information on the number of fines that have been issued. These are on-the-spot fines that are sort of like fixed penalty notices, which are accompanied by a sort of fine which you can get back if you dispute the fixed penalty notice, but they're effectively on-the-spot fines. And I think the number he gave in the last year was 32, something of that. Did I hear that correct? 32, which seems to me possibly potentially on the low side. He didn't give the number of checks. I didn't hear him say how many checks were required to result in the number of 32. I'm not demanding that there be large numbers of sort of stops on the road and coaches constantly being pulled over. But I would ask the Minister if he considers, especially given the new prohibition on cabotage, if the enforcement resources dedicated to the implementation of this instrument are adequate, if he's confident that they are. If he was able to say that to the committee, I think that would be helpful. But otherwise, we are happy to, in all respects, in fact, we are happy to support this instrument as it goes forward.